Hello friends, today I am going to discuss about derivatives and Indian perspective. The objectives of this lecture are to help the students to develop an understanding about the meaning of derivatives, to state the definition of derivatives by the International Monetary Fund and under the Securities Contract Regulation Act 1956, develop an understanding about the derivatives market, discuss the differences in exchange traded versus over the counter derivatives markets, develop an understanding about the origin of the derivatives market in India, understand the recommendations of Dr. L.C. Gupta Committee, identify the basic features of derivatives, identify the benefits of derivatives in India, and develop an understanding about the derivatives trading in India. Derivatives are one of the most multifaceted instruments. The word derivative comes from the word to derive. It indicates that it has no independent value. A derivative is a contract whose value is derived from the value of another asset known as the underlying asset, which could be a share, a stock market index, an interest rate, a commodity, or a currency. The underlying is the identification tag for a derivative contract. When the price of the underlying changes, the value of the derivative also changes. Without an underlying asset, derivatives do not have any meaning. For example, the value of a gold futures contract derives from the value of the underlying asset, that is gold. Derivatives carry risks that stocks do not. Stocks are a type of security that gives shareholders a share of ownership in a company. Stocks are also called equities. A stock loses its value in extreme circumstances, while an option loses its entire value if it's not exercised. Options are a form of derivative financial instrument in which two parties contractually agree to transact an asset at a specified price before a future date. Because the derivative has no intrinsic value, its value comes only from the underlying asset, it's vulnerable to market sentiment and market risk. It's possible for supply and demand factors to cause a derivative's price and its liquidity to rise and fall regardless of what is happening with the price of the underlying asset. Definition of derivatives by the International Monetary Fund. The International Monetary Fund defines derivatives as financial instruments that are linked to a specific financial instrument or indicator or commodity and through which specific risks can be traded in financial markets in their own right. The value of a financial derivative derives from the price of an underlying item such as an asset or an index. Unlike debt securities, no principal is advanced to be repaid and no investment income accrues. Derivatives defined under the Securities Contract Regulation Act 1956. The Securities Contract Regulation Act 1956 defines derivatives as a security derived from a debt instrument, share loan, whether secured or unsecured, risk instrument or contract for differences or any other form of security. A contract which derives its value from the prices or index of prices of underlying securities. Derivatives are securities under the Securities Contracts Regulation Act, and hence the trading of derivatives is governed by the regulatory framework under the Act. A security in a financial context is a certificate or other financial instrument that has monetary value and can be traded. Securities are generally classified as either equity securities such as stocks and debt securities such as bonds and debentures. It's a kind of instrument that is traded on the stock exchange. Derivative instruments can be traded on the stock exchange or can be traded on the over-the-counter. Exchange simply defines the establishment of the stock exchange where all the securities are traded and follow the rules and regulations by the Securities and Exchange Board of India. Over-the-counter market defines the dealer-oriented market of securities, which is an unorganized market and where the trading happens using the mode of phone calls, emails, etc. A derivative that is traded in the stock exchange is standardized and follows the regulations. Talking about exchange traded versus over-the-counter derivative markets. As the word suggests, derivatives that trade on an exchange are called exchange traded derivatives, whereas privately negotiated derivative contracts are called over-the-counter contracts. There has been a sharp growth of around 40% a year in the over-the-counter derivatives markets globally. The recent developments in information technology have contributed to a great extent to these developments. While both exchange-traded and over-the-counter derivative contracts offer many benefits, over-the-counter derivative contracts are more flexible than exchange-traded contracts. The over-the-counter derivative markets have these features compared to exchange-traded derivatives. First, the management of counterparty credit risk is decentralized and located within individual institutions. Secondly, there are no formal centralized limits on individual positions, leverage or margining. Thirdly, there are no formal rules for risk and burden sharing. Fourthly, there are no formal rules or mechanisms for ensuring market stability and integrity and for safeguarding the collective interests of market participants. And fifthly, the over-the-counter contracts are generally not regulated by a regulatory authority and the exchange self-regulatory organization, although they are affected indirectly by national legal systems, banking supervision and market surveillance. Talking about origins of derivatives market in India. Derivatives market in India has a history dating back in 1875. The Bombay Cotton Trading Association started future trading in this year. However, after independence of India in 1952, the Government of India officially put a ban on cash settlement and options trading. This ban on commodities future trading was uplifted in the year 2000. The creation of National Electronics Commodity Exchange made it possible. In 1993, the National Stocks Exchange, an electronics-based trading exchange, came into existence. Over the Bombay Stock Exchange, forward trading was there in the form of Badla trading. But formally, derivatives trading kick-started in its present form after 2001 only. As an initial step towards the introduction of derivatives trading in India, Securities and Exchange Board of India set up a 24-member committee under the chairmanship of Dr. L.C. Gupta on November 18, 1996 to develop an appropriate regulatory framework for derivatives trading in India. The committee submitted its report on March 17, 1998, recommending that derivatives should be declared as securities so that regulatory framework applicable to the trading of securities could also govern the trading of derivatives. Subsequently, Securities and Exchange Board of India set up a group in June 1998 under the chairmanship of Professor J.R. Verma to give its recommendations, which submitted its report in October 1998. To begin with, Securities and Exchange Board of India approved trading in index futures contracts based on Nifty and Sensex, which commenced trading in June 2000. Nifty stands for National Stock Exchange 50 and is the equity benchmark index of the National Stock Exchange. Its other aliases are Nifty 50 and CNX Nifty. The full form of Sensex is Stock Exchange Sensitive Index. Sensex is a stock market index for Bombay Stock Exchange. A market index is an indicator of the overall performance of all the companies listed in the stock exchange. Later, trading in index options commenced in June 2001 and trading in options on individual stocks commenced in July 2001. Future contracts on individual stocks started in November 2001. Metropolitan Stock Exchange of India Limited started trading in derivative products in February 2013. The Badla trading, as I referred to, is a mechanism of trading settlement in India. This kind of trading facilitates trade shares on the margin on the Bombay Stock Exchange. The Securities and Exchange Board of India put a complete ban on Badla trading in 2001 with the introduction of futures trading. Now, some of the recommendations of Dr. L.C. Gupta Committee. Dr. L.C. Gupta Committee recognizes that the basic principles underlying the organization, control and regulation of markets of all kinds of financial futures are more or less the same, and that the trading infrastructure may be common or separate, partially or wholly. The committee is of further opinion that there must be a formal mechanism for coordination between Securities and Exchange Board of India and Reserve Bank of India in respect of financial derivatives markets, so that all kinds of overlapping of jurisdiction in respect of trading mechanisms be removed. Financial derivatives market in India have been developed so far in three important instruments like equity, interest and currency. The first one is regulated by Securities and Exchange Board of India, whereas other two are controlled by the Reserve Bank of India. Talking about equity derivatives, Dr. L.C. Gupta Committee considered in its study both types of equity like stock index derivatives and individual stocks derivatives. The committee found in its survey that index futures are more preferable than individual stock from the respondents. The order of overall preference in India as per the survey of the committee was stock index futures, stock index options, individual stock options and individual stock futures. Basic reasons for the preference of stock index futures are: firstly, institutional investors and other large equity holders prefer the most this instrument in terms of portfolio hedging purpose. Secondly, stock index futures are the most cost efficient hedging device, whereas hedging through individual stock futures is costlier as observed in other countries. Thirdly, stock index futures cannot be easily manipulated, whereas individual stock price can be exploited more easily in India. Fourthly, it's observed from the experiences of other countries that stock index futures are more liquid, more popular and favorable than the individual stock futures. Lastly, it's also seen that regulatory complexity is much less in the case of stock index futures in comparison to other kinds of equity derivatives. Now, the basic features of derivatives. The basic features of derivative may be stated as: firstly, a derivative instrument relates to the future contract between two parties. It means there must be a contract binding on the underlying parties and the same to be fulfilled in future. Secondly, normally the derivative instruments have the value which derived from the values of other underlying assets such as agricultural commodities, metals, financial assets, intangible assets, etc. Thirdly, in general, the counterparties have specified obligations under the derivative contract. Obviously, the nature of the obligation would be different as per the type of instrument of a derivative. Fifthly, the size of the derivative contract depends upon its notional amount. The notional amount is the amount used to calculate the payoff. Sixthly, usually in derivative trading, the taking or making of delivery of underlying assets is not involved. There is therefore no effective limit on the quantity of claims which can be traded in respect of underlying assets. Seventhly, derivatives are also known as deferred delivery or deferred payment instruments. It means that it is easier to take short or long position in derivatives in comparison to other assets or securities. Eighthly, derivatives are mostly secondary market instruments and have little usefulness in mobilizing fresh capital by the corporate world. However, warrants and convertibles are exception in this respect. Ninthly, although in the market the standardized, general and exchange traded derivatives are being increasingly evolved, however, still there are so many privately negotiated, customized over-the-counter traded derivatives in existence. Further, there may also be uncertainty about the regulatory status of such derivatives. Dr. L.C. Gupta Committee was mainly concerned with equity-based derivatives, but it has tried to examine the need of derivatives in a broad perspective for creating a better understanding and showing interrelationship. Talking about the benefits of derivatives in India. The Dr. L.C. Gupta Committee recommended derivatives trading in the stock exchange in a phased manner. It is in this context, Stock Exchange Board of India permitted both National Stock Exchange and Bombay Stock Exchange in the year 2000 to commence trading in stock index futures. The question therefore becomes relevant: what are the benefits of trading in the derivatives for the country, and in particular for choosing stock index future as the first preferred product? Some benefits of derivatives are: firstly, India's financial market system will strongly benefit from smoothly functioning index derivatives market. Secondly, internationally, the launch of derivatives has been associated with substantial improvements in market quality on the underlying equity market. Liquidity and market efficiency on India's equity market will improve once the derivatives commence trading. Many risks in the financial markets can be eliminated by diversification. Index derivatives are special insofar as they can be used by the investors to protect themselves from the one risk in the equity market that cannot be diversified away, that is, a fall in the market index. Once the investors use index derivatives, they will suffer less when fluctuations in the market index take place. Foreign investors coming into India would be more comfortable if the hedging vehicles routinely used by them worldwide are available to them. The launch of derivatives is a logical next step in the development of human capital in India. Talking about derivatives trading in India. In India, the derivative trading can be done through National Stocks Exchange, Bombay Stocks Exchange in stocks. If one is interested to trade in commodities, Multi-Commodity Exchange and National Commodity and Derivatives Exchange are there. In the Indian derivatives market, trade takes place with the help of derivative securities. Such derivative securities or instruments are forward, futures, options and swaps. Participants in the derivative securities not only trade in these simple derivative securities but also trade hybrid derivative instrument. In India, derivatives instruments are available for stocks, currency, bonds and commodities. The National Stock Exchange, the Bombay Stock Exchange, the Multi-Commodity Exchange are the main exchanges which facilitate derivatives trading. While Multi-Commodity Exchange purely deals with commodities, National Stock Exchange and Bombay Stock Exchange deal exclusively in stocks. Talking about emerging structures of derivative markets in India. Derivative markets in India can be broadly categorized into two markets, namely the financial derivative markets and commodities futures markets. Financial derivatives markets deal with the financial futures instruments like stock futures, index futures, stock options, index options, interest rate futures, currency forwards and futures, financial swaps, etc. Whereas commodity futures markets deal with commodity instruments like agricultural products, food grains, cotton and oil, metals like gold, silver, copper and steel and other assets like livestock, vegetables and so on. Financial derivatives markets in India are regulated and controlled by the Securities and Exchange Board of India. The Securities and Exchange Board of India is authorized under the Securities and Exchange Board of India Act to frame rules and regulations for financial futures trading on the stock exchange with the objective to protect the interest of the investors in the market. Some of the other financial derivatives like currency options and futures and interest rate futures are controlled by the Reserve Bank of India. These are dealt on over-the-counter markets. Financial futures on interest rate include both short-term interest rate and long-term interest rate forwards. Currencies include options and forwards. Since the Reserve Bank of India is the apex body to regulate currencies and interest rates in India, financial derivatives relating to foreign currencies and interest rates generally come under the Reserve Bank of India regulations. Major stock exchanges in India under the regulation of the Securities and Exchange Board of India traded two kinds of future products, namely equity and carry forwards. Equity futures include stock futures, index futures, stock options and index options. Currently, these are traded on National Stock Exchange and Bombay Stock Exchange. Examples of such companies on which options and futures are available are State Bank of India, Telco, Dr. Reddy Lab, HDFC, Hero Honda, etc. The future of derivatives trading in India is bright and growing day by day. More new products and instruments are coming up to be traded on stock and commodity exchanges. Now talking about regulation for derivatives trading. Rules and regulations in derivatives trading serve an important purpose to sustain confidence in the financial market, to enable a common framework for listed companies and to protect minority stakeholders such as retail investors. The regulatory framework in India is based on the Dr. L.C. Gupta Committee report and J.R. Verma Committee report. The regulatory framework for derivatives under the Securities Contract Regulation Act. The Security Contract Regulation Act 1956 is enacted to prevent undesirable transactions in securities. This act provides for the direct and indirect control of virtually all aspects of securities trading and the running of stock exchanges and aims to prevent undesirable transactions in securities. It gives the central government regulatory jurisdiction over, firstly, stock exchange through a process of recognition and continued supervision, secondly, contracts in securities, and thirdly, the listing of securities on the stock exchange. As a condition of recognition, a stock exchange complies with the conditions prescribed by the central government. Organized trading activity in securities takes place on a specified recognized stock exchange. The stock exchange determine their own listing regulations which have to conform to the minimum listing criteria set out in the rules. The Supreme Court in Bhagwati Developers Limited versus Peerless General Finance and Investment Company Limited made it clear that the provisions of the Securities Contract Regulation Act apply to public limited company though they are not listed in the stock exchange. Now the regulation of options under the Act. Section 2, Clause D of the Securities Contract Regulation Act expressly defines options in securities to mean a contract for the purchase or sale of a right to buy or sell or a right to buy and sell securities in future and includes a teji, a mandi, a teji mandi, a gully, a put, a call or a put and a call in securities. The definition makes it clear that it is not a contract for sale of securities but a contract for sale of a right to sell securities in future. Section 20 of the Act expressly prohibited options. However, this provision was deleted by the Securities Laws Amendment Act 1995. Now the regulation of forwards under the Act. The central government, by notification dated 27 June 1969, that is 1969 notification, issued under Section 16 of the Act, which empowers the central government to prohibit certain contracts in specified securities, sought to restrict forward contracts. In 2000, the 1969 notification was rescinded. Securities Laws Amendment Act 1999, with effect from 22 February 2000, amended the definition of securities in Securities Contract Regulation Act to include derivatives. It also inserted the definition of derivatives under Section 2, Clause A, Subclause C. By this amendment, Section 18A was inserted in the Act, providing that a derivative contract shall be valid if they are settled in the stock exchange. Section 18A provides that notwithstanding anything contained in any other law for the time being in force, contracts and derivatives shall be legal and valid if such contracts are, firstly, traded on a recognized stock exchange, secondly, settled on the clearing house of the recognized stock exchange in accordance with the rules and bylaws of such stock exchange. Now comes the regulation under the Foreign Exchange Management Act 1999. Derivatives are also subject to exchange control regulations. Foreign Exchange Management Foreign Exchange Derivative Contracts Regulation 2000, as amended from time to time, permitted persons resident in India and persons resident outside India, that is foreign portfolio investors, to participate in the currency futures and exchange traded currency options markets in India, subject to the terms and conditions mentioned therein. With a view to enable additional hedging products for non-resident Indians to hedge their investments in India, the Reserve Bank of India, via notification number 384 RB 2017, issued on 17th March 2017, has permitted non-resident Indians access to the exchange-traded currency derivatives market to hedge currency risk arising out of their investments in India. This allows non-resident Indians to access the exchange-traded currency derivatives market to hedge the currency risk arising out of their investments in India. Non-resident Indians may take positions in the currency futures exchange-traded options market to hedge the currency risk on the market value of their permissible rupee investments in debt and equity and dividend due and balances held in non-resident external accounts. That was all about today's topic. Hope you have enjoyed it. Thank you for watching.